the main thing that we learn from our parents, I think, is definitely our values, but things that we learn ourselves are experiential, and it's going through them and actually figuring out, what are the consequences from the choices that we make.
So he came to me about a year and a half ago and was like, hey, I was, kind of like hanging out with this girl, and, we liked each other. And so at that point, he's like, but I didn't tell you. And I was like, okay, well, you're just barely turning 14. And I think that you guys are still kids, right? Like, this is just like this. I didn't make it like it didn't mean anything, but my point to him was like, I think it's fine. But if, anything moving forward, like, you are a young adult now, I said, you're becoming a man now. So like, if you decide to do that again in the future, or when you do, you're going to need to talk to me and possibly even her dad. So I want you to like know that the kid stuff is over. This is a bit more like you have more responsibility in this now. So that's why he came to me. He's like, hey, I know you said this isn't like kiddish anymore. And so that's one of the reasons why he came to me.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's great. Yeah, that's great. I would ask him a question of, how do you think this is going to impact your friendships? I would ask him a question like, what does that look like? What, have you thought about, so 15 is probably sophomore. What does that look like when you're a junior? What does that look like when you're a senior? And also, had you thought about what you want to do after high school? And, it's great to have relationships and it's great to have friendships, but life is long, and I don't know if you want to disclose, numbers on how many relationships you had between the ages of 15 and, today. But, maybe go in there like, I had a few different girlfriends.
Yeah. And I think that's the big
years.
And I think that's the thing I do share with him is like, man, I got serious girlfriends at 15. And it just, by the time you're a senior, right, you're 3 years into a relationships, it's like, it's almost like you're married, and it's like, damn, dude, just have fun. Right. So it's finding that balance of like, you don't just say no, right? You don't just say no, but you put the guardrails up enough to be like, yes, do this, but just make it fun. Like, get to know, make it fun versus it being too serious.
And maybe hit him with some stats, like, X percentage of high school relationships, end up in marriage, or whatever, whatever the stat is. Yeah. So, make it fun. Life is long, and this is part of your journey. It's part of your journey. It's part of you learning about yourself. It's part of you learning about how you learn about other people. It's about you learning how to be in a relationship with someone. Like, that's important. You're going to have a roommate when you go to college, or you're going to have, a person you're going to have to live with at some point. And, this is great practice. It's great practice. Have fun with it. Yeah.
So as we're talking about it, and as dudes are listening in, I really want guys to be like this open to have the conversation with your son, and find that dance of like, don't just be the no dad, right? Who's just like, so no that they hide it from you.
Yeah.
And then the other far spectrum is that you don't ask him anything. You don't talk to him at all about it. Like, my dad didn't talk to me much about my relationships in high school. It was more something I kind of talked about with my mom.
Yeah.
I just think that the dad should be engaged so that your son feels like you are a really safe place to come and talk.
Exactly. That's right. You want to be the go-to.
Yeah.
For questions.
Okay. So let's go to the tool. So one of the tools that you teach dads, this is a great example of like the tool that dads can use when they're having conversations with their kids. So go into that shifting perspective technique.
Sure. Yeah. So it's one of the, it changed a lot of my, the way I parent, and gave me some great insight on my kiddos. And I love sharing it with people. It's basically when you are sitting down with your kiddo for a minute, envision yourself behind their eyes and in their shoes, and imagine, what they might be feeling right now when you're about to have this conversation. They might be feeling, frustrated because they can't get a thing they want, or in your case, they might be, kind of excited that they are about to embark on a relationship with someone. But if you can imagine how they're feeling and some of the thoughts that they might be having about the feeling, you can start to connect to them and understand that, hey, I got a feeling you're pretty excited about this. And that's cool because this is exciting.
Yeah.
But let me tell you about, what through my experience, how I would approach this or something to that effect.
So the couple things I really hear from that is like, one, put yourself in their shoes, right? You were 15 at once or whatever the situation is, right? You were 8, you were 12, you had this and you had a feeling about your parent as how much you could share with them. What did your parent do to set you up to feel that way? So what can you do? Because at the end of the day, like we just want open conversation with our kids, right? So put yourself in their shoes. And then I do also love experience share versus like, hey, you know what? You should probably... that doesn't work as well.
Yeah. So storytelling is big. Storytelling. And, I remember when I was 15 and I had this girlfriend and, we ended up, we hit it off. We really liked each other, and we stayed together through even, the first year of college, went our way, but, things kind of, they just sort of eventually fell apart and, whatever the story is.
Yeah.
That will help guide them in what they do with their relationships, I think is pretty impactful when they can see a real life example.
I think one of the hard things about life is there's some things you just have to learn on your own, right? So you want to have people speak into your life, but just because I learned something, I could share that story or that experience with my son or my daughter or read it in a book, right? But some things you just have to kind of go through. So it's interesting. Some things we'll learn from our parents, and then some things we just have to learn on our own. And I don't know what if it's specific things, but any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think as far as, the things we learn from our parents, I think it's values. And I think, it's a lot of our self-concept because, we learn that stuff in the first, 10 years of our life. So, the main thing that we learn from our parents, I think is definitely our values, but things that we learn ourselves are experiential. And it's going through them and actually figuring out, what are the consequences from the choices that we make. The consequences, every choice has a consequence. And I think trying to figure out and also predetermine and also imagine the consequences of our choices is something we figure out on our own. Like our parents can tell us what that consequence is going to be, but that's the thing is like, we might question our parents on that. It's like, what if we do it this way? It might be different. So I feel like that's the thing we learn on our own are the consequences of our choices.